This is Lee Smith, and you're watching the Paul Leslie Hour.
Hey, are you here? Yes, indeed. It's the Paul Leslie Hour, episode number 1046. We are pleased to be sitting down with author-writer Lee Smith. We're going to talk about his book, Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the Fight for the Republic, from Encounter Books. 45th and 47th President Donald J. Trump commented on the book. Lee uncovers the witch hunts and hoaxes that have been weaponized against our movement to try and silence free speech, subvert our elections, and destroy the country we love. You can subscribe to Paul Leslie's YouTube channel, and please, if you would, follow Paul on X, formerly known as Twitter, at The Paul Leslie. Leave a comment and share this interview. Share this interview everywhere. And with that, we are pleased to get this episode underway.
We're here in the Palmetto State, one of the great states in these United States, and I'm greatly pleased to be sitting down with writer Lee Smith. He is the author of Disappearing the President, Trump, Truth Social, and the Fight for the Republic. Roger Stone, on his show, The Stone Zone, said that this is a book that will take your breath away. And I'm sitting down with the man who wrote it, Lee Smith.
Paul, thank you for being here.
It's a great pleasure. It's a real pleasure. We are in some extraordinary times. Your book, in many ways, reads like a novel. What are your immediate thoughts now, just a week after Election Day?
Well, it's interesting that you say it reads like a novel, because one of the things that we've happened here, and that's happened to us here in the United States, is, we've seen a long story unfolding, and the election was an important plot point or plot development, right? And a very long story. And we as Americans are used to this kind of heroic story. So look at what's happened to, it's a story about a rise, fall, and redemption. You can imagine pitching it to a Hollywood studio, right? What happened? So after Donald Trump is president, he's at the height of his powers. January 2021, he loses in November 2020. January 2021, he's brought to his knees. He's exiled, banned from social media. He's cut off from his followers. He's silenced, and then then the attacks really began. All right, we see the raid on Mar-a-Lago, an enormous lawfare campaign. Donald Trump is shot once in the head, right, and then he narrowly escapes another assassination attempt, and then he talks about having more awareness of God, right? He talks about, I'm not quite sure he's talked about praying, but certainly is more aware of God, and he's more aware, he's nearly killed. And so then his campaign acquires I think it's, it's not just the fun where people are going and listening to hear him speak and make jokes and talk about his plans, but there's also something even warmer about it, right? Like one of the things that people like about the Trump rallies is how he interacts with people. But here he really goes out of his way. He works at McDonald's. He dresses as a garbage man. It's really a remarkable thing, and because one of the most famous stories in the English language, of course, is the story of Henry, all right, King Henry, who has Prince Hal. What does he do? Rather, as the king, he cloaks himself to find out what his soldiers are thinking, what the common men are thinking, what his foot soldiers are thinking about the king, right? He wants to know what they're thinking. And so that's a very important gesture in heroic stories that we tell. And so what happens? So Donald Trump winds up winning the election. So what you say about novels, stories, what we've seen here is a real American story. So it's reality, but we know how to understand it because it's the kind of story that we Americans are accustomed to telling. So that, I think, is really important way to see what's happened here over the last several years. And I think it's a reason why Americans, not all of them, but why many Americans right now are walking with more spring in their step, why things feel lighter, right? We like it's not the ending. There's a lot more left to go, but we like where the story is. We like where the country is. So yeah, so that's how I see right now the post-election reality. You have a little bit of a breather here after the election and before the administration starts, and the inevitable struggle between the Trump administration and its many opponents, particularly its domestic opponents.
Yeah. What do you see it looking like with the struggle of the powers changing?
I think that we'll see what we saw 4 years ago, or rather 8 years ago, when Donald Trump first took office, started his term in January 2017. But it started even before that, of course. It started on his campaign and the transition team. And this is one of the things I talk about in Disappearing the President, how the then president of the United States, Barack Obama, under his as he green-lighted a surveillance campaign of the Donald Trump campaign. This continued through the transition period. So Trump and his circle were still being spied on. And then even as the president of the United States, Donald Trump was still under surveillance. So it's really quite astonishing that happened, but it's indicative of the larger anti-Trump campaign. And I think that we'll see at least that, if not more, because I think there may be more urgency at this point to stop Trump from undoing some of the things that happened during the Biden years. And plus, we have to recognize the different institutions who turned against Trump in 2016, in a way, have further hardened. Especially if we look at the DOJ, Department of Justice, which is nearly perfected the process of targeting Donald Trump and his opponents, especially all these defendants, January 6th defendants. So I think that we are going to see a great deal of conflict here, and a lot of it will be public. It'll be played out in the press. We saw what happened last time, that the press sided with the press sided. I mean, the press believed it was part of the anti-Trump resistance, and so I believe that we'll certainly see that again, and that will be, in some ways, it's already started, and it will kick into even higher gear as we get closer to the inauguration date.
The subject of Barack Obama is a frequent one in this book. What do you think the biggest misconception about Barack Obama is?
Well, I think the biggest misconception of what's happened the last several years here, during the Trump years, we learned to talk about the deep state, right? By which we meant the permanent federal bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., who, the way we talk about, well, they think that they really run it, and it's the unelected officials. It's not the president and the people that he chose, and of course the president is chosen, elected by the American public. And so that's how we've learned to talk about the deep state. I think that's been a mistake, however, to talk about the deep state, because what we're talking about is thousands and thousands of bureaucrats, and the nature of a bureaucrat is not to run things, right? The nature of a bureaucrat is to follow orders, is to put down a paper trail to protect themselves, put down a paper trail to direct certain things. So Washington is a very hierarchical city. Naturally, it's the national capital. And so people take orders from on high, right? In the military, the orders come down. They go down the chain of command, and the same thing happens through politics. The problem, the attacks on Donald Trump were not waged alone by just, by mid-level FBI agents or analysts at the NSA. These were, these operations came from on high. And as we understand, as we see, Barack Obama tasked his CIA director, John Brennan, to write an intelligence product claiming that Vladimir Putin helped Trump to the White House. So that in 2016. So this delegitimized Trump's presidency, first of all. Second of all, it divided the country, right? If half of the country voted for someone who had been compromised for a foreign power, at best, that half of the country was, they were unwitting dupes at worst, they were complicit in a conspiracy to betray the United States to a foreign power. So that was Obama's doing. That's what he ordered his CIA director John Brennan to do. We also know that Barack Obama instructed his FBI director James Comey to continue the surveillance of the Donald Trump team. So one of the important things I wanted to do in disappearing the president was not just to show what's happened over the last 8 years, but to make it clear that Barack Obama was behind this, that Barack Obama was running it. I wanted to show the organizational network, the people who are really on top, right? Again, we're not talking about 15,000, 20,000 bureaucrats in our nation's capital. We're talking about extremely powerful people with resources and with money at their disposal, and who are pursuing and advocating specific causes on behalf of other figures. So none of the names are really secret. American audiences will recognize the name George Soros. Some of the other names might be a little harder to recognize, like election lawyer Mark Elias, who is playing a very prominent role right now on behalf of the Democrats, especially in Pennsylvania, where we're seeing they're trying to push through. Elias and his lawyers are trying to push through a whole bunch of ballots that have been thrown out and should have been thrown out. So again, the point here is to show what that organization and network looks like, who's on top, and where, and what role other people in that network play. And I call them in the book the shadow network. But again, the key is that Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, the only president who was the only president who has stayed in Washington, D.C. since Woodrow Wilson. However, Woodrow Wilson stayed in Washington because he had a stroke midway through his second term and could not leave. Barack Obama resolved to stay in Washington for other reasons that have nothing to do with his being debilitated, felled by a stroke.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the deep state. I was in Europe recently, and I thought that it was kind of going to be an escape from talk about the election. And as it turns out, everyone wanted to come up to me and ask me about the election. Lots of people were asking me about this deep state. And the deep state isn't always this dark, shadowy guy. Sometimes it's someone that you do see. I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about this, the people that we commonly call the deep state.
Well, the Europeans have a very different perspective in terms of bureaucracy. There's their own national bureaucracy. So say in France, the bureaucracy is very important, right? But there's also the European bureaucracy run out of that's Europe-wide. So the Europeans are always besieged by bureaucracy. And of course, Europe is in a strange position. So there's still the remnants of monarchs in Europe, as well as prime ministers and presidents and other such things. And look, these are small powers, right? France is a historic power, but Emmanuel Macron projects very little power, even outside the former French, colonies, right? Or whether even within the former French colonies, like Lebanon, Syria, throughout Africa. No one really cares what Macron says. That's not very important. In the United States, it's a very different matter, right? Where the president of the United States is, how are the different ways we refer to him? The leader of the free world, the most powerful man on planet Earth. So this is real power. So for the Europeans, their perception of bureaucracy, that someone can make their life hell for years and years, some in an apartment somewhere in Paris or somewhere in Rome. Well, yes, okay, that's true. And it can happen here too. We're all familiar with what it's like at the DMV. But the people who are prosecuting a campaign against Donald Trump, these are not the people of the DMV, right? It's not even the people at the FBI and the CIA. Did they play a role? Yes, they were weaponized to play a role. And this is good. this is what happens when you have powerful people who are directing subordinates to do things on their behalf. That's what happens. That's again and really I think the central or the crucial purpose of disappearing the president is to clarify what's happened here over the last nearly a decade and what is likely to continue to happen. The campaign against Donald Trump has not been run out of the lower levels of the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. It's being run by very powerful people.
Writing is a discovery tool all too often. We want to find out about something, and in order to write about it, we must investigate. Was there anything that you didn't uncover when writing Disappearing the President?
Interesting. Well, and the cover is Donald Trump. And, this is the rally, the Butler, Pennsylvania rally, where Donald Trump was shot in the face, and that's a lot of people want to know: was this simply a function of the Secret Service's incompetence, or was it malevolence? Did they actually set Donald Trump up for this? I'm an investigative reporter, among other things, and so I think it's important to have evidence to make the case. I'm not sure there is any evidence right now to say that that the Secret Service and the FBI set up Donald Trump for the attempt on his life. However, that the FBI and the Secret Service have been so bad about giving information to the American public, right? We've seen all the different things that the FBI has done to Donald Trump over the last several years. That the agencies, how they have targeted Donald Trump, and the idea that this happens. You would like to think that our federal law enforcement authorities would say, look, we understand how important this is. There's the presidential candidate from one of our two major parties, and there's been two attempts on his life. During the course of our investigation, we're going to make as much information as we can, make it public, and we're going to continue to brief not only congressional officials, not only to brief the White House, but also to brief the American people. But of course, they did nothing of the sort, right? They buried the whole thing, and unfortunately, one of the things that we've learned over the last several years about the FBI now and other federal bureaucracies, when they say, well, it's part of an active investigation, what that means is they're burying information, and that's what happened here. So the people who say, well, I actually think that this was an attempt on the life of Donald Trump, and the Secret Service and FBI seem to me complicit. Again, I don't. There's no evidence for that. Nothing that I've found, but I understand why people think that, because the FBI has been anything but transparent. Again, they virtually buried it. I mean, we also have to point to the news media. I mean, it's very strange. No one has approached, or very few reporters have approached the family of either of these assassins, either Mr. Crooks or Mr. Ralph, and that itself is also very strange. I mean, we can attribute that to political. You can attribute that to partisanship and the effort to bury the fact that two Democratic Party supporters tried to take Donald Trump's life. But nonetheless, it's evidence that our how about this? It's evidence that our institutions are not working to prepare the American people or to provide them with the kind of information they need to make important decisions about their lives and the fates and futures of their families, communities, and country.
So much of this story is related to speech and the shutting down of speech. Truth Social, it's even in the title. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this is very important. We've seen the subtitle, It's Trump Truth Social and the fight for the republic. Truth Social, of course, is the social media company that Donald Trump started. He was banished from social media after January 6, 2021. Banished from Twitter, banished from Facebook, because they accused him of being responsible for what they've labeled incorrectly an insurrection. Of course, the evidence on Twitter that was buried was the fact that Donald Trump told his supporters who were out there rallying that day, first at the Ellipse, which is the park behind the president's house. He told them to act peacefully, patriotically yet peacefully, that the police were on our side, were on the side of Trump and Trump supporters. They shouldn't attack the police. So, social media buried this information. Of course, this was used to target Donald Trump with the January 6 investigations. But it wasn't just Donald Trump who was targeted for censorship. It was Donald Trump supporters, and this went on during the 2020 election campaign. People were thrown off of social media for asking questions about the handling of COVID, for spreading COVID misinformation, whether it was just asking questions about the various protocols, the mask mandates, and such things. The other thing that people were banished for was asking questions about the election procedures, the new election procedures like mass mail-in ballots that were implemented due to COVID, right? Because people were alarmed about the prospect of gathering in public places and afraid of spreading COVID. So it was very important, by the way, obviously, that they had to keep ramping up the fear so people would be scared of going to polling places and they would want to vote from home. But people who asked questions about the integrity of mail-in voting, they too were banished from Twitter. And let's remember that both sides, Democrats and Republicans, agreed that mail-in voting was a facilitated voter fraud, right? We know there's a 2005 bipartisan report written by former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker. So in 2005, people believed that, but that all changed in 2020. When apparently voting by mail was totally fine and there were no problems with this at all. The arguments made for censoring people, for what they call stopping misinformation, are ignorant, are ignorant and based in misunderstandings of our traditions of freedom of speech, of the First Amendment. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes famously talked about the marketplace of ideas, and he was against censorship because he said, well, the answer for bad speech is just, more speech. Let the truth flourish. Let all these ideas, compete. That's what he meant by marketplace of ideas, that people will prefer the truth to falsehood, and that's fine. That's a perfectly nice argument, but that's not the reason for the First Amendment, right? The reason for the First Amendment is that the state is not supposed to have a monopoly on speech. That's the point, right? It's not like we will someday find truth. Truth belongs to finally our Creator, right? That's what truth is. I'm not a preacher. But the idea of truth, we recognize true things, but a greater truth. Again, this is a religious discussion. We're talking about right now politics, and this is the reason for the First Amendment. That the state, the monarch in the beginning, should not have the monopoly of speech. And that's why people are allowed free speech. And yes, the idea is that if someone is saying something untrue, then of course people say, well, that's garbage. That's nonsense. Here are the facts. That's the marketplace right there. Well, you made this claim and that's obviously untrue for this reason, that reason, and other reasons. But look at how the idea of free speech, freedom of inquiry, freedom of religion have these different things. I mean, that is what Western society is, right? You don't have science, right? You don't have the empirical method without freedom of speech. And so the the idea that people want to start banning misinformation, or there are misinformation boards, misinformation boards or bureaus, or all these different things that are checking people for misinformation and disinformation, it's obscene, right? It's not just obscene because they believe that because some of them posture is such that they believe that they are uniquely qualified not only to discern truths but to distribute them as well to their fellow man. I mean, it's a lot of these people are just plain stupid, right? They're Washington bureaucrats. They're morons, frankly. But the more obscene thing is, like, don't you understand why this civilization looks the way it does? It's because freedom of speech, right? You may not like what I'm saying, what other people are saying, but because we have freedom of speech, that's why people say, that's why people, that's how people are allowed to further our society. And this is what Elon Musk means, right? Why he believes in the importance of freedom of speech, because you can't do these different things if there's no such thing as the empirical method, if you can't experiment, right? If there's no such thing as trying and failing and working towards working towards truths, right? Not a big truth, but truths. You don't have a society that looks like that. So that's why Elon Musk bought Twitter. And that's why Elon Musk has been a defender of Donald Trump. And that's why Elon Musk is a righteous opponent of censorship. So yeah, it's a very dangerous thing for this country, but I believe, thank God, that most Americans understand that it's a very dangerous and bad thing for this country, for all of Western society. It's not just here.
Yeah. We've had quite a few years. Storied would be one way to put it. There have been moments where I've wondered, where's this all going to go? Has there ever been a moment where you thought, maybe America is on its last leg? Maybe there's cause for us to lose hope?
Part of this has been purposeful, right? We have to understand that part of this has been purposeful. There's been an effort to demoralize the American public, right? To treat us like slaves. And this is part of the censorship. This is part of the effort to censor Americans. Shut up. You have no right to speak. We're going to take this and that away from you. Shut up and take the vaccine. You'll do what we tell you to do. So yeah, I think a lot of Americans have felt that their country, their liberties, their traditions, their history has been yanked from their hands. They're not slipping away. They're actually yanked from their hands, right? It's like, oh, well, to hell with July 4th. We're actually going to celebrate Juneteenth. To hell with American history. It's all about slavery. And actually, it really starts in 1619, not 1776, the Declaration of Independence. America actually starts in sin. Right. So, yeah, I think a lot of Americans have felt assaulted and besieged. And there's an effort to, as what Barack Obama said, to transform America. And so people have been very upset about this, and you see what's happened. You see the different things. It's been a real assault on America, and part of it is aesthetic. You look around. I mean, we're in a beautiful state, as you said, the Palmetto State. But you walk around and you see what's happened to some of our great American cities: Washington, New York, Los Angeles, and it's just disgusting. You see stuff like the trans movement. I mean, it's just garish. The images are awful. Whether it's sterilizing young girls, or whether it's these, autogynephiles like Rachel Levine and the, Richard Levine and the Biden administration, cabinet positions in the Biden administration. So again, it's been a very purposeful assault on our senses and on our spiritual selves. Nonetheless, we are all Americans, right? And we believe Americans are by nature optimistic, right? And also Americans understand the rest of the world may look to America as the cavalry that's coming to save them. We're all we have, right? So either we fight or we lose it. So yeah, so while it's been hard at many times, I think for many, many people, we see how people have been feeling We see how people express their anxiety, whether that's on social media or elsewhere. But also, I think, yeah, the American people are and we're not grounded in fantasy. We recognize the things that are happening in our country and around the world, but nonetheless, there's a great optimism, and this is one of the most important things about the Trump campaign, right? Again, because it wasn't just a story about winning; it was a story about a story about light, a story about life, a story about love, and it's deeply moving. I mean, the people who watched what happened here. Oh, I mean, it's just such an important. I mean, it's just such an important time. You know, I have a child, and he's too young to be able to remember most of it, but he'll be able to say, "Yeah, I was alive for it."
Yeah.
You know, I was around then. It's just one of the great moments, just one of the great gifts to us as Americans. It's part of our history. So again, it's been hard, but we're Americans, and we're gonna fight. You know, because this is our thing.
Yeah. Do you think there's a change going on? I was in Atlanta not long ago, and there was a young black guy in a car, and he drove by, and he yelled, "Trump 2024, baby." And, we went from this being the ultimate stigma. You never saw people in inner city areas wearing MAGA hats, and now you just might. Do you think there's a change going on?
A lot of, well, I mean, Americans have lived the reality of the last 4 years, right? The different things that have happened. I mean, it's very hard, though, of course, many people have ignored things like the fact that our borders have been opened and that crime rates across the country have spiked, the fact that American wages have been suppressed, the fact that American taxpayers have been burdened by having to pay for services for non-citizens. So yeah, I think that Americans are very responsive to reality and saying, I don't get it. This is so terrible. This is so bad. They're trying to lock us down again and make us take this vaccine. I don't want to take the vaccine. I don't get a flu shot. Why should I have to do this? It doesn't look that bad. I know some people who've gotten sick. I might even know some people distant, related to friends or something like that who have died, but no, I'm not going to take it. No, you have to take it. So I think that again, not every American has responded to that, but we all know what's been going on. So the idea that Donald Trump, people like Elon Musk have joined forces with him and said, you don't have to live this way. You can live another way. You can just look, what is MAGA fundamentally? But MAGA, okay, it's a movement, I guess, but it's fundamentally just a bunch of people who said, I just want to live a normal American life. Yeah. I want to live like my parents did, like my grandparents did. I want, by which we all mean, I'm working hard, and I want to get everything, do everything I can for my children. I want this beautiful country that has provided so much for me. That I've also put into, I want it there for my children too. This is what our parents wanted, our grandparents wanted, great grandparents want. That's what MAGA is, right? It's not a right wing movement. It's not fascist. It's not white nationalist. So the idea that so many people have caught on to that now, like the African American cat you're talking about, who's waving out of his car saying Trump 2024. Okay, he gets it. He sees what's happening in Atlanta or elsewhere. So yeah, I think more people are probably more comfortable now saying, well, wait a minute. Yeah. I don't think that what Donald Trump is saying is so crazy. And all right, he's a New Yorker, and I don't like the way a lot of New Yorkers put things, but I feel that way about all New Yorkers, and I don't like the way he's said different things to different people. But boy, when he's talking about hard facts, yeah, that totally makes sense to me. So yeah, I think people are coming to their sense. Many people are coming to their senses.
Yeah. I saw you on the Stone Zone with Roger Stone, and you were talking about how when Republicans go on CNN or MSNBC, it can be a little disappointing. Why do you think it's a bad idea for Republicans to do that?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's ridiculous when they do it because our media environment has changed profoundly, and I don't know if I said this to Roger Stone, but my father was a journalist. He's retired now. My grandfather, my grandfather was in media. My great grandfather was in charge of typesetting at the New York Daily News. So I've been in media for a long time. And I understand that media is generally a liberal left-wing pursuit, but that's not what we've seen over the last decade or so. What we've seen is something else. We've seen that the media is part now of intelligence operations, right? Political operations, again, which is very different from it being liberal, right? These are part of political operations. That's what the whole Russia collusion stuff was. This was a political operation to target Donald Trump. So what the media is doing now is it's targeting Trump and Trump supporters. And so for Republicans to go on CNN, MSNBC to legitimize these operations, I think is a big mistake. Now, I've seen other people get on CNN and they make a good argument, and maybe there are people there listening, and MSNBC like, yeah, okay, that's good. I wouldn't have heard that otherwise. Yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument, and maybe it works for some people. For me, it's like, no, let them suffer. Just let them all speak to each other and holler at each other, and in that crazy sound box that CNN and MSNBC is. Don't bring on Republicans and legitimize that discourse, because that's what they do. They say, oh, well, we're fair and balanced. We bring on so and so and so and so to have this opinion and that opinion. They're not. It's not about balance. It's not about fairness. It's an operation. And that's why they bring on people on the right. And you see all the different times, the people on the right, very nice people, most of them, senators, congressmen, they get on there and they're just hammered, right? They're hammered by whoever it is. Like, I don't know, why aren't you letting me tell my side of the story? What's done? Like, yeah, they're not going to let you talk.
Yeah.
That's why, So yeah, was it important for JD Vance to get on CNN? I don't know. Did he? I mean, he certainly made Trump's case very well on the campaign. But what about? I mean, when do we get to choke them of air and say, yeah, we're not going to keep you afloat anymore? You can just, again, stay in your own crazy sandbox and scream at each other, and that's it. And we're not part of it. This is very important for our people and our side to understand what's happening in the world. And if people want to come over and see what's happening in the real world, then they should be watching that or listening to that, right? Like Truth Social, like X. People want to get a better picture of the world, and, not everything's going to be accurate. So you're going to have to do a little work to figure out what's happening. But if you're going to be over there and you think that's the truth, forget it.
Yeah. Was there an interview you did for Disappearing the President that was the most memorable to you?
Well, I spoke with the president, President Trump, and the book opens with an interview with President Trump. Yeah, I mean, he's just an impressive person. He's very kind and very generous and very funny too. So he's kind of, he's making jokes, and sometimes at your expense, but it's, I don't know. I've interviewed him before. I've met him before, and I just get a huge thrill out of it. And I think about how he is in those rallies in front of thousands or tens of thousands of people, and it's so warm. His relationship with other Americans and his connection comes across. And I just think, yeah, I'm so lucky I get to be here. There are like millions of people who would love to just have a chance to sit and ask the president a question or two, and then hear him explain and just see the stuff that he does. I went in there in Mar-a-Lago, and he's it's the Masters, and he's just watching the Master, and he's talking about Tiger. He's talking about, he's talking about, other golfers. And, he's just funny. He's, oh, Tiger, it's just great. It's just terrific. So yeah, that's definitely the most, I don't know. I think anyone that gets to interview Donald Trump has a lot of fun and remembers the experience.
I bet. The way that the left talks about January 6th, it almost seems like it's a religious holiday for them. And I think they're afraid of losing that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, remember that even before Joe Biden dropped out of the campaign and was replaced by Kamala Harris, at the core of that campaign was defending democracy, right? That only Joe Biden could protect democracy from Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters, right? And of course, the campaign concluded nearly when Joe Biden said Trump supporters are garbage. So there's this idea that there was this scary core out here, half of America, in fact, that was not that did not follow. That was not really, how do we put this? Was an outlier, right? Was not really convinced by democracy. They weren't really Democrats, and they were led by Donald Trump, whom they compared to Hitler or a fascist, a dictator, a tyrant, all these different things. So January 6th, a lot of it's just hysterical and crazy, but in a very real sense, January 6th it represents the core of that regime's legitimacy, right? Because without January 6th, again, and I think that January 6th was a demonstration that turned violent in parts, and the people who broke the law, whether they committed felonies or misdemeanors, should be prosecuted. But that's not what happened with January 6th. So the prosecutors turned this around, and they were going after nonviolent protesters, and they were getting terrorism enhancements. So it's terrible what they've done. But January 6th is important to them to show that, or because it's the only piece of evidence they ever had that Donald Trump or his supporters ever encouraged violence. And of course, remember, this is in contrast to the George Floyd riots of the spring and summer of 2020, which, 19 people were left dead then, caused billions of dollars worth of damage across the country and 600 different protests around America. So to show that Trump was, dangerous, they had to keep asserting that January 6th represented something deadly for democracy. So that's what I mean when I say that January 6th is really the core of the regime's legitimacy, that regime's legitimacy. That's why they had to keep pushing it. That's why they had to keep emphasizing it. And that's one of the reasons why these prosecutions have been so insane. The main reason for that, of course, is to punish Donald Trump supporters, to punish opponents of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. So it's very upsetting. But again, we've seen that the left has done this repeatedly over the Trump years, right? We started off with Russiagate. So Russiagate was this information operation, political prop that posited, the nonsensical narrative that Donald Trump had been compromised by Vladimir Putin himself, right? That was the point of the dossier, that Vladimir Putin himself was overseeing the Donald Trump compromat. Right. So it was garbage, but that's what they had to do. Donald Trump is not really, he's some way fundamentally anti-American, un-American, not a part of our thing. Right. But look at what they mean by, American. I mean, it's tragic. What they mean by American is opening our borders. What they mean by American is monetizing the trans movement, which involves the sterilization and maiming of children. So, but to prop up what they believe in, Donald Trump had to be portrayed as something entirely alien to the country. Hence, January 6th is the only thing that the regime's legitimacy rested on for years. And now we certainly hope that the January 6th defendants, the horrible enhancements that these people will be released. So again, remember what happened after the George Floyd riots. I mean, almost none of these people were prosecuted, and most of the times, people who go to the Capitol to protest, I mean, they're not prosecuted, and they do much worse than the January 6th defendants did. So, God willing, all these people will be able to go home, and they are actually, I believe, owed restitution as well. We'll see.
I don't recommend necessarily people watch the late night talk show hosts, but one of the things they've been saying lately is that we voted against our democracy, which could be a line in a Woody Allen movie or something. What do you make of that? What's something we can maybe succinctly say to serve as a rebuttal when somebody says something?
Yeah, this has been one of the stupidest and most dishonest things that the press and entertainers have done. They all knew who Donald Trump was. They've known. As I told you, Paul, I grew up in New York City, and I've heard Donald Trump's voice in my ears for for about half a century now. And so, there are plenty of people in New York who didn't like Donald Trump, thought he was crass, whatever, or thought he was funny, or liked him. But everyone's known who, especially in the entertainment capital of the world, in the media capital of the world, New York, they all know who Donald Trump is. So the idea that 8 years ago they turned him into this threat where he'd actually been compromised by Russian intelligence services is absolute garbage. And so now the idea that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, that he's like Hitler, that he's a dictator, a fascist, is just preposterous. They know who he is. They're making up these stupid stories, and they all know better. They should all be ashamed, because what they've done is they've participated in an operation, not just targeting Donald Trump, but targeting the sanity of Americans, right? They've known that they know, or they should know. I'm willing to accept the fact that some of these people, some of the entertainers and some of the media are so damaged and so broken, they've actually allowed themselves to believe that Donald Trump is really a threat to democracy. But what's really been hurt is they're the ones who have hurt our processes. That's what our democratic processes, right? By accusing Trump of these outrageous things, which are absolutely untrue and grounded in nothing like fact.
Well, for anyone who reads Disappearing the President, is there something you ultimately want them to get out of that experience?
I wanted to tell it like a story, so that people, because I find if you just throw facts at people, it's very hard. It's very hard to digest and understand. So I wanted to tell it as a story, unfolding. Here's this part, here's that part, here's what happened here, here's what happened then. So I wanted people to be able to understand what's happened the last 8 years. I wanted people. A lot of people have a general sense of things that have happened, but I wanted to put it all down, record it, document it, because, for instance, Russiagate, I mean, tragically, to come back to places like CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, they still tell a made-up story about Russiagate, that Donald Trump colluded, and Trump officials colluded with Vladimir Putin, which is garbage. They're still saying that. And so look what's going to happen for the foreseeable future. I mean, this is a great shame for the country, but that in blue cities across America, students will be taught that the 45th, now 47th as well, president of the United States colluded with Russia to become the 45th president. I mean, it's shameful, but that's going to be accepted fact in these places. And so I wanted to get down what are the real facts, and so that's what the book is about. And that's what I want people to come away with, what really happened, who did what to whom, who's in charge. And that's why it was so important to attribute leadership of this plot to Barack Obama. And, interestingly, I'm not the first one who pointed that out. The first one who pointed it out was that man, Donald J. Trump, in a March 2017 tweet, when he remarked that, wow, just found out Obama had my phones wiretapped at Trump Tower. And you'll remember that people made fun. Well, it wasn't wiretapped. Oh, he's paranoid. He's lying. Well, that's exactly what happened. And this book explains how that happened. So it was Donald Trump who identified very early who was leading the campaign against him. And it was it still is Barack Obama.
All of this gives me hope about the legacy media maybe dying.
I mean, people are turning away from it all the time. This is one of the reasons for the hysteria, right? This is one of the reasons where you turn on MSNBC and you see four people in boxes hollering, right? Going further and further. I think Trump is blah, blah. I think Trump is X. I think Trump is Y. It's just madness. There's no news. There's no information that's useful for people. CNN may appear to be a little more moderate, but it's the same garbage, right? So no, I certainly hope, because it's dangerous for our minds and dangerous for our souls, but also there's nothing there that people can use insofar as real information that will help you live your life and understand the world around you, or your own country, or even your own community.
So in closing here, you are writing about China now?
Well, that's what my next book will be about. Hopefully, I hope to have that finished very soon, and that'll be coming out next year.
I always like to give my guests the stage, so to speak. Very open-ended question. For anyone who's joining us, anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening, what would you say to them?
About anything.
Totally open-ended.
Well, I think that they should also be optimistic about what's happening in America now. What's happening in the United States. I really do feel walking around my neighborhood, just interacting with other people. I think that people are breathing more regularly again, breathing more easily, rather. People are happy. Look, one of the exciting things about the Trump campaign was also what it talked about for the future, right? Here's what we're going to set right. You know, what was the Harris campaign? It was about Trump is blah, blah, blah. This is all nonsense. But fascist Hitler. And the Trump campaign is like, here's what I'm going to do right. Elon Musk and the Department of Efficiency. Okay, that sounds really good. Making government work for the American people like it should. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we have to make food healthy again. And some of these pharmaceutical products are unhealthy too. And people are like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So really, we're going to have better, better food, a tastier food, healthier food. That sounds great. And so now that we're at that point, and now that we're looking at that, now that we're part of that future that's been promised, like, okay, I think a lot of people feel ambitious, entrepreneurial. What can I do? What's my part? So I think it's a fantastic time in America. And people say, like, how can I join my efforts and my energies to all these great things that are happening around me that were inspired amazingly by this real estate mogul, billionaire, celebrity TV star. I don't know where it came from, but it's America. It's a strange country. And that's what happens here. So just going to enjoy it. I think a lot of people feel like that. You never know where your blessings are going to come from. And I think a lot of Americans feel blessed right now. I know I do. By the way, I feel blessed to have gotten to know you over the last couple of weeks, Paul. So it's been very nice.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I feel blessed to be able to interview you and to get to know you well like this. And I should say the word that has been going around in my head the most these days is blessed.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it's a good feeling, and it's a good thing to focus on.
That's right.
Lee Smith,
Thank you, Paul.
thank you so much.
Sorry, I just really better handshake in there. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We thank you and appreciate you dropping in for the Paul Leslie Hour today. You know, you can help the Paul Leslie Hour in our mission to provide independent media content like this by visiting www.thepaulleslie.com/support. We truly thank you. This is your announcer speaking. Performance of The Entertainer intro song and Corina Corina outro song, courtesy of John Primorano. Well, that's it for today. So until next time, be safe and be good.